I am James Montgomery. Thank you for letting us share with you today some concerns we have with the Ichetucknee River. Many generations of Columbia Countyans have enjoyed the refreshing waters of the Ichetucknee River. I well remember the hot afternoons I spent floating the Ichetucknee during the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. Then it became a state park, and now we share its cooling waters with the state of Florida and the rest of the world. You and many generations yet unborn have the right to experience the Ichetucknee. But with rights come responsibilities. We could lose the Ichetucknee. So join the CHS leadership class and listen carefully to Mr. Stevenson as he explains to you today's dangers and the solutions that we must implement in order to preserve this natural wonder. We must protect the Ichetucknee. Thank you and enjoy.
Today we're discussing a very special place. In fact, the protection of that special place, and that special place is Ichetucknee Springs. Now you may wonder what we're doing in downtown Lake City in front of the City Hall and the courthouse to discuss Ichetucknee Springs, which is 16 miles to the south. But this is all about water. We can't have a spring without water, and the water, in a sense, begins here in Lake City. Envision a gigantic underground bathtub that is 300 square miles in size. And that bathtub is filled by rainwater. So the rain falls on this 300 square mile tub, and the drain for that tub are the springs down here at the bottom of the 300 square mile Ichetucknee Basin. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to follow the water downhill. At this point, we're on top of the hill in Lake City. We're going to follow the water downhill all the way to the springs. For thousands of years, the Ichetucknee Springs were supplied by a surface river, and we can see the old ancient riverbed right here that leads right down to the springs. And that river had three tributaries. Those tributaries would have been called the North Fork of the Ichetucknee. Today we call that Cannon Creek. And the Northeast Fork of the Ichetucknee, which we call Clayhole Creek, and the East Fork of the Ichetucknee, which we call Rose Creek. These are still tributaries today. They are still connected to the river, only much of this river is now underground. You've all heard of underground rivers. Well, here we have one right here in Columbia County. So these tributaries, these creeks, still supply water to Ichetucknee Springs. Our concern now is, of course, we want the water. The water is good. What we don't want are the contaminants that have entered that water as the water flows across the landscape, across roads and parking lots and lawns and pastures. That water picks up contaminants, and that what is hurting the health of Ichetucknee Springs. What we're going to do now is follow the water downhill to our next stop, which is Alligator Lake. We followed the water downhill from in front of the courthouse in downtown Lake City to Alligator Lake. Just as the Okefenokee Swamp is the headwaters of the Suwannee River, Alligator Lake is the headwaters of the Ichetucknee River, some 14 miles to the south. We have to be careful about the quality of the water headed towards Alligator Lake, because in time it's going to flush into sinkholes that you see here, enter caverns and cavities underground, and flow all the way down to Ichetucknee Springs. Now we need the water, but we don't need the pollutants and contaminants that are in the water. What we're going to do now is move on to the south. We're going to follow the water farther to Clayhole Creek, which is one of the tributaries of the Ichetucknee River. We followed the water downstream from Alligator Lake to Clayhole Creek. We're standing in front of the Columbia Livestock Market, which is a real success story in the Ichetucknee Springs Basin, in that thousands of head of livestock go through this facility every year. And of course those livestock leave waste. We were concerned that those wastes may be washing into Clayhole Creek. However, upon inspecting this facility, we found that the owner, Mr. John Willis, had put in retention ponds. These retention ponds capture all of the waste and none of it goes into Clay Hole Creek. We were so excited to find that as a success story that we gave Mr. Willis the Florida Springs Protection Award at the Springs Conference. All right, so we're standing here at Clay Hole Creek, and if you look down slope, you can see the creek at that bridge. And now we're going to follow the water further down slope to the next tributary that we want to talk about is Cannon Creek and Cannon Sink. We follow the water to Cannon Sink, which is at this location, and the tributary known as Cannon Creek flows for 3 miles paralleling I-75 and goes underground here in this sinkhole. Our concern at this location is contaminated stormwater. Because this creek drains a considerable area, about 6 square miles, that is developed. It begins up at the intersection of I-75 and US 90, so a lot of contaminated water enters the underground system right here. You can hear the traffic from I-75 that is right here on the edge of the sinkhole, and on this side is the newly widened State Road 47. So we have a lot of stormwater from both of these highways entering this sinkhole. Next, we're going to go across I-75 near Clay Hole Creek to discuss another area of importance. We're now halfway between Cannon Sink, where Cannon Creek goes underground, and Clay Hole Creek that later goes underground into sinkholes. The two creeks are connected by this canal right here behind us, and it carries the stormwater from Cannon Creek down into Clay Hole Creek. Our concern here continues to be stormwater because there's a lot of contamination that comes off of these paved areas as well as these mowed lawns. Another problem that we've not yet discussed is septic tanks. All of these facilities are on septic tanks. And septic tanks produce real high nitrates, and nitrates are what feeds the algae in the springs down at Ichetucknee. So septic tanks are a major problem that we're having to deal with in springs protection. From here we go to the wastewater spray field for the city of Lake City to see where the wastewater from the city is sprayed out on the landscape. We are now nearly at the end of Clay Hole Creek. Clay Hole Sink is at this location, and we're at the City of Lake City's 380-acre wastewater spray field. This is where the effluent that's already been treated in the treatment plant is sprayed out. Some of it evaporates and some of it soaks into the ground, goes down to the groundwater, into the aquifer, and flows on towards Ichetucknee Springs. So we have nitrates in this effluent, and as you know, we have been trying to discourage or reduce the amount of nitrates that's flowing towards Ichetucknee Springs. Now the city has done some really good things here. They have discontinued the practice of applying 65 tons of nitrogen fertilizer a year on this spray field. They have also stopped using the spray nozzles nearest Clay Hole Creek, and they plan to go to advanced wastewater treatment, which will further reduce the nitrates down to 3 milligrams per liter. And finally, they intend to plant trees on these fields because they feel that trees will soak up the nitrates better than the grasses. So some good things are happening here. It would be best if the spray field were not at this location, right here on the edge of Clay Hole Creek, but it is here, and the city's doing their best to improve the situation. The groundwater and the surface water flow at this site is south towards Clay Hole Creek, which is towards Ichetucknee Springs. Clay Hole Sink is right at the bottom of the slope at the south end of the spray field. And we know due to the dye trace studies that the storm water in this creek is headed to Ichetucknee Springs, so that's why this location for the spray field is critical for the future of Ichetucknee Springs. Everything possible must be done in order to reduce the impact of the spray field on the groundwater beneath the spray field, as well as the water flowing towards Ichetucknee Springs. We're standing here at Dial Sink, which is the end of Clayhole Creek. You remember that just a few minutes ago, we were right here at this intersection on State Road 47, where Cannon Creek overflows and enters Clayhole Creek. The storm water then comes down Clayhole Creek into Black Sink, and when Black Sink can't take all of the flow, it overflows into Clayhole Sink. And when Clayhole Sink can't take all the flow, it overflows and comes here to Dial Sink, where it again goes underground. If Dial Sink can't take all the flow, it overflows, crosses the road, and enters the old Ichetucknee riverbed flowing towards Rose Sink. This is the location where the dye was put in by one of our dye trace studies. Dye was put in at Black Sink and here at Dial Sink. And it kind of laid here in the sink for a while until a storm brought a volume of storm water down the creek that pushed the dye into the cave system, and in 2 days it was found in the drinking water wells of the Columbia City Elementary School and in Rose Sink. So we've got the confirmed connections between this cave system and that cave system, and it was later found coming up in the springs at Ichetucknee Springs. So for a distance of 10 miles, we have the scientifically confirmed connection between these sinkholes and the springs. We're standing on the edge of Rose Sink, which is the terminal point for the 10-mile-long Rose Creek that crosses the landscape in this part of Columbia County and the Ichetucknee Springs Basin. The creek goes underground here and unfortunately often carries debris with it, like tractor tires and milk crates and other kinds of human refuse. But this creek is the tributary, one of the three tributaries of the Ichetucknee River, and it connects to the main underground river that's conducting water to Ichetucknee Springs. Periodically, cave divers enter Rose Sink to explore the cave system that is conducting water to Ichetucknee Springs. Here now is diver Jerry Murphy of Dive Right of Lake City with a very rare glimpse at what's below.
Hello, I'm Jerry Murphy, a geologist and cave diver. Our team of cave divers have explored and mapped the Rose Sink Cave to contribute to the protection of the water flowing through the cave to the Ichetucknee Springs. Join us now for an incredible look at what lies beneath the surface. When we descend into Rose Sink, the first thing we see is the opening of that sink and our last glimpse of sunlight for a while. The cave likely lies beneath houses that have been built in the old riverbed called the Ichetucknee Trace. We have explored roughly a mile south of Rose Sink, paralleling State Road 47. Although catfish live a short distance into the cave, only blind cave crayfish are seen farther back in the cave. 120 feet deep and some 400 feet from where we began the dive, you'll notice an old tire. Debris like this was carried into Rose Sink Cave by floodwaters flowing downstream over the years. The dark color of the water in this area is caused by algae growth due to nitrates from fertilizer that seeps into the underground streams from Rose Sink. Further into the cave system and 100 feet beneath the surface, the water becomes significantly clearer due to groundwater, meaning it's been less impacted by man. While in the cave, we draw several samples of water to be tested later by the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. The department periodically asks divers to take samples from other springs and caves around the state. We swim upstream from Rose Sink to Rose Sink Swallow. The swallow is where surface water from Rose Creek enters and is carried to Rose Sink. It's not hard to notice the amount of debris that enters the caves. On this dive, we encounter old logs, truck rims, tractor tires, drums, and oil cans. Fertilizer, pesticides, and treated sewage that is allowed to be pumped on the surface are harmful to the water system below ground. Stormwater runoff from roads and parking lots carry pollutants from automobiles into retention ponds, streams, rivers, and into the aquifer. Illegal dumping of garbage and chemicals into sinkholes like Rose Sink lead to contamination of the springs in Florida. It's important that people living near Rose Sink protect the creek from pollution, since the creek flows into Rose Sink, and the same water resurfaces within a week at Ichetucknee Springs. When excess polluted stormwater from Rose Creek ruins visibility in the cave, we are unable to conduct our exploration. The stormwater often carries debris that has been dumped into Rose Creek, and the debris is deposited in the cave. What we do on the surface can seriously affect the water under the surface.
We've followed the water from Rose Sink to the lime rock mines, and the lime rock mines were created right here in the old riverbed of the Ichetucknee River after it dried up. And they did that because the lime rock is real close to the surface here. So this was an excellent opportunity to obtain lime rock that was used in the building of I-75. Our concern about this mine, which is 1 mile wide and a ½ mile north and south, it's a huge mining operation, is that they were blasting and excavating to a distance of 100 feet below the surface. And we were concerned that they would rupture the cave that is beneath this mine. The cave, as you know, leaves Rose Sink and follows the old riverbed right beneath the mine. And we felt that if the blasting and excavation ruptured the cave, it would let pollution go into the system, and it would also possibly block the flow of water to the springs. So the state of Florida bought the mines in order to shut down the mining operation and eliminate that threat. Someday this will very likely be a really fine county park for swimming and picnicking and activities like that, but today it's not open to the public because it's not been developed. From here we'll go to Ichetucknee Springs, continuing to follow the water, follow the cave system to where the water will reappear to the surface again. We're now about halfway between Rose Sink and Ichetucknee Springs. We're along the Ichetucknee Trace, and you note there are no creeks in this area, so whatever is spread on the landscape in this area will work its way down through the soil into the aquifer and then flow to Ichetucknee Springs. This area is slowly converting to residential housing from agriculture, as you see behind me, and it's gradually changing much of it into planted pine, which is better for springs. We often say that springs love trees, lush lawns make them sick. And that's because we usually don't have fertilizer in the planted pines, whereas we do have fertilizer on fields such as you see behind us here. So our concern is hay fields and pastures and row crops where fertilizer is placed on the soil. The Florida Department of Agriculture is working with the farmers in the basin to try to reduce the amount of fertilizer that they're using, as well as to keep the cattle out of the creeks. Also, the Department of Transportation has discontinued fertilizing all of the road shoulders of the highways that cross the Ichetucknee Basin. That's 32 miles of highways, and they've reduced their fertilization by 32 tons per year. So that's a significant success. We began our journey 16 miles north of here in downtown Lake City in front of the courthouse, and we've wound our way through the Ichetucknee Basin all the way down here to Ichetucknee Springs, where the water is flowing out of the ground. Now usually we look at a spring and think of the beginning, where the water first flows from the ground, the beginning of the spring run. Marjorie Kennan Rawlins in the book The Yearling said, "The bubbling spring will rise forever. Its thin current is endless. The spring is the beginning of the waters sliding to the sea." So you see, a lot of people have thought of the spring as the beginning, but now you know the spring is the end of the pipe. Whatever we've put on the landscape up here in this 300 square mile recharge area in the basin, in time will flow from the end of the pipe. Right now you're looking at the Ichetucknee Head Spring, and you're looking at one of the most beautiful springs in the world. It's a second magnitude spring, but the problem that we're having is the nitrates coming out of the spring are fertilizing algae and hurting the ecology of the river. So we're losing species, we're losing plants and increasing algae, and some people are even allergic to the algae and have bad skin rashes and other health problems as a result of it. So that's why we're working so hard to protect the Ichetucknee from these contaminants that are going into the creeks and into the sinkholes. Now this is a very special place. Nearly 200,000 people a year come to this springs and river system to recreate. This is the premier tubing river in the entire United States. And it brings in about $22 million a year to the local economy. So it's very important because of its natural values, its recreational values, and also its economic values to the people of Lake City and Columbia County. So it's a tremendous natural resource, and we've just got to do everything we possibly can to protect it from the contaminants that are getting into the creeks. Remember the 3 tributaries, and into sinkholes and down into the cave system and coming up here in the springs. Thanks for joining us today to learn about the Ichetucknee Springs Basin and learn what you can do to help protect the waters flowing to this magnificent spring.